So this will be a brand new series I'll be starting up called You Cannot Compare the Eras, and this will be volume 1. As in recent years, with the ascension of the sports debate culture, from First Take on ESPN to Undisputed, those shows have been proven successful, but a lot of fluff GOAT conversations have come out of this, and for the most part, it's pretty much circular talk, similar to the things we see play out in the political landscape today. But a sports analyst have made a comparison of how Allen Iverson would fare into today's NBA. But before we put this into proper context, you guys check it out.
And then give him the ball and let him go to work. It wasn't because it was a character flaw or anything like that. But if you go look at the way he played a lot of minutes and just chucked a lot of shots. And if 41% of them went in, it was considered a good job. That would not fly in today's game.
Now, just putting a little context into that, of course it would not fly into today's game. But also, Allen Iverson would not be shooting at a 41% clip in today's game. His shooting percentage would be in the realm of something a little bit over 50%. Because if we take a look at his era, not only the pace of play was slower, but the style of play really impacted his shooting percentage. As that early 2000s era was the beginning of the NBA removing themselves from the Jordan years and trying to find that entertainment balance, that spark, because the game was still predicated around the big man. And when you look at the NBA in that 2000s phase, a lot of the players coming in were sort of the Michael Jordan babies. The same way today we see the Stephen Curry babies, the Trae Youngs, the Tyrese Halliburtons. They all grew up watching Stephen Curry. The same thing would even apply to Stephen Curry. He's a Gilbert Arenas baby. But going back to the early 2000s, there were a lot of Michael Jordan babies. Ray Allen, Steve Francis, Dwayne Wade, T-Mac, Vince Carter, Paul Pierce, Tracy McGrady, Allen Iverson. And we could also add on top of that, teams started pivoting away from having the mindset of just building around a big man. You see, with the success of Michael Jordan just capturing those 6 championships, GMs and front office people started looking towards a different archetype of player building around, that being a perimeter scorer. And at the time, it was considered normal for him to take a high volume of shots due to the physicality. And that's another thing we have to put in proper context. And I'll stick to the early 2000s Allen Iverson era when I'm speaking on this. But around that time was the beginning of just these enforcers being a little bit more skilled, but yet they were still around, but they were earning less and less minutes as the game kept evolving. But the league was in a transition from that 90s era into the 2000s. And then when Steve Nash had came through by the mid 2000s with the faster pace, kind of similar styles that we see teams playing today, once that style took off, the league took notice, and like any other entertainment product, they slowly started tweaking their rules to favor this type of play as it was more palatable on TV. But Allen Iverson shot 41% in an era where the game was pretty much a half-court game, the pace was slower, the final scores on a lot of these games were like 69 to 80 or 69 to 75. The physicality was real, and he was a small man. He might have not even been 6 feet. But yet he was still averaging 30 points per game. And he was shooting at a similar clip that a lot of the star shooting guards / perimeter scorers were shooting at. Guys like Kobe Bryant always hovering around 40%, Tracy McGrady, etc., etc. And that's pretty much due to the physicality of that era. Just guys having the ability to be on the floor for 30 plus minutes while not even really being a scoring threat. They were just physical enforcers. So Allen Iverson, Kobe Bryant, all these guys from the early 2000s era had to maneuver around these enforcers. So of course they wouldn't be shooting 55% like we see today with the game so spaced out and physical enforcers that used to be able to get minutes in the 90s and barely in the early 2000s. Now today, if they can't score, they would not get those minutes. Meaning that today's scorers are dealing with guys that are way more skilled and they're not really the physical enforcers that they used to be. That's why guys like Tyrese Halliburton can average what he averages today. Same thing for Trae Young. But had these guys played in Allen Iverson's era, they would not even be averaging 25 points per game. And I can even make a comparison. Trae Young in today's era, where the defense is slightly disadvantaged, is still hovering around that same 40%. So you begin to see when we put things into proper perspectives of why you really can't compare eras. So every era has its phases. I would say in the early 90s, if you look back, That was the beginning phase of the power forward being more skilled. We've seen guys like Chris Webber started to come through, then eventually Kevin Garnett, Amari Stoudemire, and even in the early days, Dirk Nowitzki played more of that power forward role. But it became more common for power forwards to be skilled big men. A lot of the modern style that we see today started really around 2014, 2015. And some of the guys from the early 2000s and even the 90s would be averaging 30 plus in today's era, and their shooting percentages would take a 4 to 5 to even a 7-point bump. But at the end of the day, I'm not shocked that statements like this get said without things being put into proper context, as the sports debate culture from First Take to Undisputed, a lot of these frivolous debates with no context behind them, it just makes for good television. But a lot of these things tend to be fluff. So it is what it is.